My week has been pretty good. Busy as always, doing lots of good stuff. But it's been super hot here. Like in the 90s, super humid. And yeah, I'm ready to be over the heat. So it's been good. It's cooled down a little bit, which is nice. But man, it was super hot for a while there, which I did not appreciate. Um, Anyways, I hope everyone is doing good. I hope if you watched last week's video, enjoyed kind of that first video on some of my experience with continuous glucose monitoring, and what that looked like kind of just as an everyday average meal, or day of eating, I guess, for myself. So if you didn't see that, go back and check that out. Just going over kind of what my blood sugar looks like on a just everyday average day of eating for myself. Um, So, continuing on the discussion of blood glucose, I wanted to this time talk a little bit about what I've been observing with exercise um, and my blood glucose. So, generally, what you'll see is there's lots of things that can cause your blood glucose to go up or down. And in general, most people will see their blood glucose go up when they start exercising. And again, the people out there who just say, any spike in blood glucose is bad, without context to that, kind of it really means not a whole lot, right? So why did it go up, and how high did it go, and how long did it stay there, and for what reason? So um, the reason why your blood sugar or blood glucose goes up when you exercise is because your body releases stored glycogen to fuel the exercise that you're doing. So this is a normal physiological response. It should happen, right? And so when you start to work exercise, and particularly if you start to work exercise hard, you'll see a spike in blood sugar, and that's okay. It's not something you should be afraid of. It's not a bad thing. It's perfectly natural thing. And you want to see that actually. If you don't see that, that's probably a sign of something's up, right? So what I wanted to show you is just some of the spikes or changes that I see in my own blood sugar, or blood glucose, as I go through various different types of exercising. So I generally throughout the week I will do um, a couple strength training sessions, and then I will do some rowing, some of which is pretty intense. I'll do a lot of walking, and then some just low level kind of movement type of stuff, right? And so I just want to show you what I kind of notice in myself as I do these various different forms of exercise. So I'm gonna take a look at my phone again here. So let me do that. There we go. All right, so there is my phone. Now this is a strength training session that I did, right? So you'll see, kind of go into it at a fairly normal weather level. It's kind of postprandial. It's maybe 2 hours or so after I've eaten breakfast, and so you'll see I start off and kind of like around 100, and then you'll see a bit of a spike here, and I kind of peak up over at around 120, which is pretty good, pretty high, right? But this session and the peak comes kind of early on in the session and kind of drops back down. So this strength training session took me about 90 minutes. So I was done around 1:30 or so. So we're back down to 92 by the time I'm finished. But kind of early on in the session, you'll see a peak, right? The first few minutes or so, first 15 minutes or so is mostly warm up stuff. And then I'm starting to get into some movement. And the reason why we see this peak here is because that's right around the time I'm probably deadlifting. I was moving 320 for 9 reps at that point. So, more than double my body weight for 9 reps. 8 or 9 reps, I think it was. And yeah, so you expect when I'm working that hard, which I would consider a pretty tough session, especially those deadlifts. Also, supersetting with some overhead pressing at the same time as well. I expect to see that peak in blood glucose, and I fairly consistently see this on my hard strength training sessions, where like if I squat or I bench or I more squat and deadlift, probably because they're just a little bit more intense than say bench press. But when I squat and deadlift, I'll see this peak while I'm doing those squats and deadlifts, and then kind of tapers down as I move to more less intense, kind of maybe more accessory type of movements. I mean, they're still intense, but they're not as intense as something like double body weight um, deadlift for that many reps. So you just start to see this kind of little decline as the session goes on. So that's pretty much the pattern I see with most strength training, which again, this is I think fairly normal for that type of intensity. Now, um, for rowing, this one gets a little wonky, I think here because you'll see. Well, so this first exercise here, again, I'm coming in, around that 100 milligrams per deciliter. About again, this is my days are fairly consistent, so this is a day where I row, but I would be eating the same breakfast the same time beforehand. So probably 2 hours after my meal, I'm going to start rowing here again around 12 o'clock. You can see the consistency happen. Um, and this is I would say, a pretty difficult row. It's a 20-minute row um, for probably at like an 8 out of 10 RPE, so pretty high exertion. And what I'm doing here is I'm doing 10 minutes of that row nasal only, but I'm working up towards my, what I could possibly tolerate. So just breathing through my nose. So I'm right on that edge of wanting to open my mouth. So I'm probably getting up for me, my max heart rate that I've seen on the rower is up into the low 160s, and I'd probably get into the high 140s of heart rate before I start to, after the first 10 minutes, then will breathe in and out through my mouth, right? So probably getting a little bit over 5,000 meters generally in these 20 minutes. Um, and so it's a pretty hard row, but I don't see as big of a spike as if I was deadlifting generally when I row. And I tend to see it kind of peaks towards the beginning and then at the end it kind of drops off, right? And then later on, I did a little bit of a hike on my incline treadmill here afterwards, a drop when I do that, which is more aerobic. It was definitely more aerobic. So I kind of, we'll talk a little bit about this in a second, more with some more of the aerobic work that I do. Then I got in the sauna. Was this next one? I was trying to see a spike here, and the spike from the sauna. It's hard to say exactly what it is because I'm not sure if the spike gets caused by the sensor getting a little wonky because of the amount of heat that I am at. It's up at 160, 170 degrees in the sauna, or if it's really just that intense that my body's dumping a whole lot of blood sugar. There's too many confounding variables there to really tell. But after I got a sauna, I got in the shower, and you can see a nice drop back down. Um, this is less of a spike than what I would saw with the Freestyle Libre. I'm wearing the Dexcom. This is less of the spike of what I see in with the Freestyle Libre in the sauna, but it's hard to tell whether it's the sauna, the heat, or if it's the heat stress, or if it's just the heat messing with the sensor. It's hard to say. So that's another example. Um, this next example is quite interesting because I don't have a good explanation for this one, and it actually is better to look at the overall day here. So this is where I went out for a trail run. Again, like around the same time, around this time was a little later, probably around 12:30 or so. I started running, and if we look at the run, I initially see a little bit of a jump, but then I see a steep decline as the run progresses. This is about a 40-minute run. So if I started here, I was probably done around 1 o'clock. So right around 1 o'clock, I see a little bit, so I start it peaks and then drops down during the run. But after the run is where the interesting stuff happens. Because after my run, you can see this huge decline, right? So right around 1 o'clock, I finish, I hop in the shower, it's super hot, and then huge decline. I'm down into the 50s for blood sugar. I peaked, bottomed out around 50 something, 58, 56. Yeah, 56 seems to be the bottom out of that run. And it stays there. And then I eat my normal lunch and I get a little of a bump up, but then it goes right back down. And even dinner, a little bit of a bump up and then back down at night, overnight, too. And I believe actually this night it got even lower down into the 40s after midnight because I think I remember my phone telling me that I was going to die because it was so low. But yeah, super interesting. I've seen this twice now. I've repeated the same thing twice. Um, can't explain why it crashes like that after the run and stays that low until the next day when I actually eat breakfast. So I eat 2 meals and before it actually comes back to, what you would expect to see it at where I normally hover. I don't know. I can't explain that one. Um, it's a little weird. Um, yeah, so this is the next day. You can see some just super low all night, until the morning. And then I have breakfast. So this peak here is some morning movement, and then super low after that, and then breakfast, this is normal for breakfast, but then breakfast happens, and I kind of return to baseline after that. But yeah, so it's that one I don't have a good explanation for because yeah, I just don't know why. I've seen it twice. I have to kind of look into that a little bit. Now, the other thing movement wise that I want to talk about is a little bit around movement post meals. So, one of the best things you can do to control your blood sugar response after a meal is to do some type of movement, right? I generally, after each meal, besides dinner, I'll generally walk. And even after dinner, I do a little bit of movement and clean up and getting dishes ready and all that stuff. And so after dinner, I'm not just plopping down and sitting on the couch right away. I kind of get things settled and then I get the kids up and I put them to bed. So we're brushing teeth and all that fun stuff. So moving around a little bit after dinner too, but not like a formal movement session where after breakfast and lunch, I generally like to go for a walk. And it's inevitable that no matter what I do, if I go for a walk, it just absolutely blunts everything, right? um, now, depending, so I guess my takeaway there is like a if you have problems with your blood sugar, like you notice that it stays elevated for a long period of time, or you're having problems controlling it, the best thing you do is some kind of movement, whether it's a walk or just a bike ride or something to just move your body around and tell your body to do something with that blood sugar that's in your blood is the best thing to stop it, right? So you'll see after my meals here, I have a peak. So I probably eat a peak, and this is well over 100 grams of carbohydrates that I'm eating for breakfast, and then a subsequent drop down, right? And that's probably when I get back from my walk. And because I probably have so many carbohydrates, it doesn't take care of everything, and it kind of peaks back up. But these peaks are not um, high in when we're talking about disease states, right? So it peaks at 118 and you see these sharp declines, and a lot of people get up in arms about the sharp declines too. I don't experience like hypoglycemic response. Like some people will have these declines in their blood sugar, and they feel absolutely terrible. I don't feel terrible. I don't notice this. Like even when I was talking about the run where it drops down into the 50s, it doesn't affect me. I don't feel any different if I was at 50 or 100. Like it all seems very similar to me. So subjectively, I would have no idea that this is happening unless I was looking at it. And I'm not sure if there's anything bad per se. It's just the blunting of the response from the physical activity and then further release of probably my food because these are just slow releasing carbohydrates that I'm using or eating most of the time is just continuing to bump it back up. So I'll see that little subsequent peak sometimes afterwards. And so that's kind of natural. for me, I guess I don't know if it's natural per se, but that's the response I normally see just because I generally walk, it tanks it, and then it comes back up as I release probably more of the food, digest more of the food. Here, a little bit of different response here. What happened here? Kind of interesting. I probably waited a little bit. I was busy working or something, so I had my oatmeal. I peaked to 135. Naturally, my body's insulin kicked in and dropped it down a little bit. And then I had a little bit of a peak, and then I probably went on a walk, and then that dropped it way down, right? And then I see it down here, and then I eat, and it goes back up. And then you'll see, like, again, this kind of pattern where it peaks, drops. This is after dinner. Again, a little bit of movement, not even really formal, drops it back down. And I get another little peak after that. I sit down on the couch and comes back down. So movement is by far the best thing to do. Now, the one thing that I noticed that a lot of people say, oh, if you work out, beforehand, then have your carbohydrates afterwards, you'll have a lot less of a glucose spike. And I don't see that, right? I see, I'll work out. So I rode here pretty hard, got in the sauna, etc. And even after doing that, I I didn't quote unquote deplete things enough to just blunt everything. So I still see a spike. And again, I'm consuming 100 grams of carbohydrates at this meal. So, I mean, maybe if I was consuming 50 grams or something like that, I would see some kind of less response, or I wouldn't need to go for a walk. It would kind of just be stable. And I do have some days where I'll show you where I've eaten some much less carbs at a meal, and I'll show you kind of the difference between those days maybe next time. But yeah, movement is by far the biggest thing, biggest lever you can pull when it comes to you know using some of that blood sugar that gets released from your food. I try to move a little bit just for a variety of reasons throughout the day, but especially after my meals. And this is one of the reasons why I do it. Um, but you can see that it's nothing like that will take care of any kind of blood sugar response as long as you're moving. And I think that's where we get into a lot of trouble as society, is that I'm eating whole food carbohydrates and I'm eating a lot of them, but also people are eating a lot of processed um, carbohydrates, hyperpalatable foods, probably the same amount of carbohydrates I'm eating, and then they just sit all day long. And this response, these peaks and valleys, they never see the valleys. They never get down. It just sits up at 130, 140, 150, 160, 180, and stays there, pins there the whole day. And that's where the problem is. When we talk about type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, that's where the issue is. So I hope you found that a little bit insightful, a little bit useful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, or want to know more information about my movement practice and how I see it. I'm sorry, I'm so sweaty. I look so sweaty here. Uh, if you have any more questions about my movement practice and how that affects my blood sugar, or anything that I left out that you want to know about, and yeah, definitely hit me up with either questions in the comments or just direct message me. As always, if you want to get these videos delivered to you, I'm sorry this one's a little bit longer, but if you want to get them delivered to you as quick as possible, and without having to stalk me on social media, you can go to my website, rjbhealth.coach, click the newsletter link at the top, enter your email address, and sign up for my newsletter, and I will email you every time I put out videos or blog posts or anything like that. And if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, again, I'm happy to chat with you about that. Go to my website, again, rjbhealth.coach, click the discovery call button on the homepage and fill out the form, and we can chat a little bit more about which would be a good fit to work together. So with that, I hope everyone has a good weekend, and I'll chat to you all next week.